questions about what can you do with your mums after they're finished blooming, whether they're kind of like florist mums that you get from the grocery store, or they're mums that you've had in pots that you've placed outside, nestled in with your pumpkins and things like that. And really there's no reason you can't plant them in the ground once they get to be a little bit past their prime. Sometimes people just discard them and put them in their compost pile, but if it's especially prized color, then typically I do try to plant them. I didn't get a lot of mums this year, partly, well, for a number of different reasons, because it's been kind of a year of restoration and renovation. And so I'm going to give you a little tease about tomorrow's video. Stuart and I both noticed that it came up on our, you know how if you've got an iPhone, probably if you've got some other kind of Android phone, it will come up in your photos and show you what happened a year ago that day. And what came up for us was really, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, very PTSD, because it's the 1-year anniversary of that very horrific ice storm that we had. And I'm sure you guys get tired of me talking about the remnants and how we're constantly having to clean up from that, and how it's been a year of reclamation. Well, it was important for me, I guess, to go back and really look at that video to see how far we've all come in our gardens, but also to not minimize the amount of devastation and give myself kind of a break for why things still don't look the way I want them to look. So tomorrow we're going to show you some video snippets and some stills of what things looked like a year ago in 2020, because it was really unbelievable. In fact, I was telling Stuart, I forgot about the fire that we had on our street. I forgot how long we were without power, but this was a reminder. But back to the topic for today, which is what can I do with my mums? And I think because of last year, all the mums got destroyed. This year I thought I'm just going to go mum light, but I did get 3 of these beautiful pots. I've done some videos where I showed you how I styled them around the bistro area. I had some tucked into my window box in the back, but it's supposed to get cold this week. And this morning was all about moving and relocating a lot of my tender plants to my friend's greenhouse. I had a friend come by to help me load up the really heavy, large pots, and those have pretty much moved on. And now, since it is a beautiful day, finally, it has been horrifically windy this week. In fact, so windy that it was probably dangerous to be outside, because there's still so much dead wood and some surrounding trees that they kind of became widowmakers, and you really had to be careful where you were walking, because so many large branches were coming down in 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts. And then the regular wind throughout the day was still very, very strong. In fact, if you were frail, it probably really wasn't safe to even be out. You could easily have been blown over. So we had about, what, 3 or 4 days of that, Stuart, this week. And today it's finally beautiful. So Stuart, if you don't mind showing, I've got all the French doors open that go into the studio. I've got the stereo on. OU is getting ready to play football. And so I'm taking advantage of the calm conditions and the fact that the ground is pretty pliable from the recent rains we've had to tuck my mums into the ground. Now, this whole bed, this border across from the potager, I really wasn't ever pleased with this year. Part of that was operator error. I was so busy working on my book, I didn't dedicate nearly as much time to it as I normally would have. Part of it was because I lost a number of things to the Arctic blast and the storm, and maybe I was a little dispirited. A lot of it was just time, but I didn't do a whole lot to this area. One thing that I lost was lots of the Chef's Choice rosemary and other things that I had kind of in the front of the border. Now, what I noticed this year was that some of the Sedum Autumn Joy, which I love so much, this year, it really, actually the past couple of years, while it can handle strong sun, I think the sun, because this faces south, was just a little bit too strong. Okay, Stuart, look up here. The squirrels are everywhere. They've been eating some of my little pumpkins. But I think it was just getting too much sun, and I noticed that this is kind of what happened. So, you know, it would just get a little overly bleached out. Some of it would get burned, and it just didn't hold up at the end of the summer as well as I would have liked it to hold up. So I am going to, in the front of the border, I'm going to plant some things that are really, really tough. And what could be tougher than a mum? Now, these are all the same color, but if they come back and they are not true to their peachy tone, I don't particularly care. Now, one thing that I'll do is make sure that once I get them in, I will cut the flowers back. And you can see here, if you compare the two, so this one still looks pretty. The other two are kind of tired. And I did water these well. These are kind of tired. So I will prune these back and deadhead these once I get them planted. And I'm going to do the 3 of them in 1, 2, 3 globs running up and down the front of the border. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of taking out some of the Sedum Autumn Joy that's already here, and I'm going to replace them with those mums. Now, I have a whole, let me see, Stuart, I'm going to have to get in your way, I apologize, but I've got a whole wheelbarrow filled with compost out of my compost bin. I think this year I've used up pretty much all of it. Now, if I were gonna use this really as a mulch, I would make sure that it was screened and it was beautiful, but I don't really care about that because I'm using this more as a soil amendment than anything. Now, I'm rather surprised at the quality of this dirt. I really expected it to be a lot more with a consistency of really heavy clay. That's how it is pretty much in the back of the border. In the front of the border, it gets amended more. So this is actually pretty good soil, and it's pretty friable. But what I typically want to do is just dig a big hole. Now, some of the stuff in the back here is actually going to come out. And when I say things in the back, I've still got some zinnias in there. I've got, if you look back here, I've got some coleus. I've moved a lot of the pots that were just sitting in the border. I've moved them out. So some of these things will come out, the annuals, the coleus, the zinnias and things. And why I want to go ahead and get them out is because I want enough exposed soil that I can sprinkle some more poppy and larkspur seed. Now, a lot of it that was already in here went to seed in situ. In other words, the seed heads dried and they went to seed right in place. But a lot of this was planted very densely, and some of it probably when the seed fell didn't make really good seed to soil contact. So once I clear this out a little bit, I'm going to come back in here and sprinkle some more seeds. But I digress. That will be in the back 2/3. Right now I'm concentrating on the front of the border. So there is a little friendly worm there, which is a good thing. So I didn't ask my question of the day yet. So here's my question of the day. What do you guys do if you have mums as part of your fall decor on the porch, just wherever, in pots or in the ground? What do you do once they're spent? Do you plant them? Do you compost them? What do you do with them? So for all of those of you who have asked, what can you do with them? What do I do with my mums after they're past their prime? Well, this is what I do with them. So these I'm going to plant. And I'm not really putting any Osmocote or anything like that. I really don't care about any supplemental food. But I mean, it would be a shame to discard this beautiful mum because look, it's not even root bound. The roots aren't compacted. It's got really good, loose, friable soil that it's already growing in. And you can kind of get a glimpse of the future, what it will look like next year when I have these big mounds of these peachy pink mums cascading out over the edge of this border. So I think that's going to be really beautiful. And I'm going to plant that a little bit higher, so I'm going to put a little bit more compost in. Now typically, if you're planting any kind of perennial, really anything, you want to dig a hole that's about 2.5 times the size of the root ball itself, of the pot itself. But in this case, I'm not doing quite such a big hole because there's other things planted nearby. I've got some germander here planted nearby, and I want that to stay. And also because this soil, part of the reason you dig a big hole is so that you really loosen all of the surrounding soil so that the roots of the plant itself can really penetrate the soil easily. But this soil is so loose and beautiful, that's not too much of a concern for me. So you can also see here that when I toss the soil over to the side, I probably covered up some seedlings and things. I could have put it on a tarp and then backfilled, but I'm being kind of lazy. So I am going to make sure I have good contact there. This one, I am not going to shear back or shear off any of those flowers because these still look pretty, but I will do it with the other two. So I'm going to water this in really well. And then I'm going to move on to my next clump. Now you can see here an example of what I was talking about, how some of the sedum autumn joy in the front just became a little bleached out, a little bit leggy. And while I still want pockets of it, I just don't think I want quite so much of it. So over here, you can see here where I've done this before where I had a mum. And it's just now getting ready to come into bloom. I've got a little mum there. But I think I'm going to plant another batch of it right here. And again, this soil is a little bit heavier. And do I care that that gravel is there and it's going to intermingle with the soil underneath? I don't care at all. In fact, I like that because it adds additional grit and improves the drainage of my soil that tends to be really heavy. Now, whenever possible, I try not to stand on the soil itself so I don't compact it, but that's okay in this case. Now, I've got a little bit of gold sturm rudbeckia here, and you know what? I'm just going to leave it there for right now. Now, most things, I think I'm guilty of this, horrifically guilty of this, is I plant things too densely because I want immediate gratification. You can see there how much more compacted that soil is. It's much more heavy clay. Sometimes when I dig out chunks of clay like this, you guys, I will just discard it or throw it to the back of the border or something, and I'll replace the volume of that spot with fresh compost that is looser. Now, the thing about mums is they're extremely forgiving. They really... Stuart just looked at me like, huh? The thing about mums is they're very forgiving. I don't have to be really fastidious about soil preparation and all of that. You guys know how tough they are, how they'll come back no matter what. Now, one thing I am going to make sure that I do is next spring, as they start growing, I will definitely keep cutting them back until about the 4th of July to delay their bloom. Now sometimes if it's a color that I like, if it's white or if it's a different color that matches kind of my spring tableau, my spring and summer tableau, then I'll let them go ahead and bloom. Then I'll shear them and then I'll let them bloom again later in the fall. Look at that beautiful root ball. I don't even really have to loosen it. And you'll notice that I'm planting them slightly on an angle that leans towards the front. So it will put its best foot forward and I can artificially influence how it grows, because really the roots don't know which end is up. They're going to grow however I position the plant. So notice how some of that gravel is mixed in with that dirt, and that's okay. And the wonderful thing about gravel in my very heavy clay soil is that unlike the compost or shredded leaves or any kind of organic matter, it breaks down over time and is ultimately consumed by the clay. But things that do not break down, amendments that do not break down, like gravel or chicken grit, that provides permanent amendment value to loosen up the soil. So there you go on that one. Now this is not neat and not tidy at all. And I'm really ready to put the garden to bed. It's been, as you will see tomorrow when Stuart and I post a recap of last year, it's been a very trying gardening year. And I am not sorry to put it to bed. I'm anxious to go inside by my fireplace with lots of my books, and I can enjoy the garden from inside with all these beautiful evergreens. So there you go, the answer to your question. Can I plant my mums after they finish blooming? What do I do with my mums after they have completed their job as being a part of your outdoor fall decor? And that's what you do. You can plant them in the ground. Well, if you've held on this long, here's my fashion epilogue. If you're not interested, just go on to the next video. So my chapeau today, my hat, is kind of a felted wool. I'm not sure where I got it. I can't remember. I've had it for years. My top is just an inexpensive flannel shirt from Old Navy. I always buy them kind of big if I'm working out in the yard in them. I like them to be loose, and that way I can also kind of tie them. My joggers, I think, are from Target. I've had them for a couple of years. I kind of arrived at the athleisure look pretty late after COVID, so I'm just really now getting on the bandwagon. Now I'm showing you this. Well, these boots came from Target years ago. I love the kind of quilted pattern on them. I think that looks kind of Chanel-esque, but why I took off my boot was because I wanted to show you my cute socks that have a picture of goose on them. My grand pup. These actually belong to my husband. They were a Christmas gift from my son to him last year, and I came across them in the laundry. So I decided that as a little jolt of joy for myself today, I would borrow them. My earrings, I don't want to forget my earrings. These are sterling silver loops, French loops that I got from my mother-in-law who passed a year ago last February. So there you go. There is my fashion ensemble for today.